If you're running your business on Shopify, I have a stark warning for you. Your business is vulnerable to fraud and different cyber attacks. Today, I'm going to tell you some very quick and easy ways of things that you can implement on Shopify to make sure that you don't lose your business and your revenue. So listen up, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story that I heard recently in the news.
Laura McNutt is calling out Shopify, saying the company didn't protect her from fraud and charged her extra when it happened.
I'm paying Shopify to host my e-commerce shop. I'm paying Shopify to process the payments. I thought I was paying Shopify to vet criminal activity.
McNutt says customers bought items from her Shopify online store, picked them up in person, then issued a chargeback similar to a refund through their bank. She lost the items and the income. Shopify kept its fees and charged extra $15 fraud fees for each transaction. McNutt says she's out more than $7,000.
And it's a monumental amount of money in my world. And I just can't absorb that kind of loss. It's devastating.
The RCMP calls this card not present fraud.
So as you heard in the example, Laura has a physical store and she accepts online orders. She allows people to order things online, and either she ships these items to them or they come and pick them up in the store and so forth. So this is a small business, and Laura doesn't seem like she was aware of what was going on with fraud and what was going on with risk. As a business owner, you cannot be ignorant to the things that you need to be doing to secure your business, unfortunately. Even though you sign up for a platform like Shopify, which kind of comes in an all-in-one package, it feels like it's a very done-for-you type of solution. Unfortunately, when it comes to credit card payment fraud and just other types of attacks, you are not safe unless you turn on specific settings. So one thing that a lot of business owners don't understand is that when you're working with any software, including big players like Shopify, you are still responsible to add different layers of security to ensure that your store is not frauded and you don't obviously get a lot of chargebacks or issues with fraud. Now, in the case of Laura, as you heard, she allowed these transactions to go through. She shipped out the items, or people came to pick them up, and then they filed a chargeback. So not only did she lose the money for the transactions, she also got charged an additional fee of $15 in order to process the chargeback. Now, the unfortunate news here is that she will need to pay these fees because this is her responsibility. And as a business owner, as I was saying, it is your responsibility to make sure that your store is safe. Now, if you have a physical business, you know that you need to lock your doors in the evening, at night, when you finish your day. So this is a similar situation that you need to think about if you have an online store. So what a lot of online business owners don't realize is that safety, security, and fraud prevention is really your responsibility. It is not for Shopify to turn on different settings or to decide what transactions get approved or not. So if you have an online store, a website, and so forth, and you're selling anything online, it is your responsibility to ensure that you prevent fraud as much as you can, and you prevent anybody from stealing from you, essentially. So just as you would have, for example, a physical store, if you leave the doors unlocked and somebody comes in at night and steals all your stuff and leaves, and the police come and you say, well, I left my doors unlocked, they're going to say, well, this is essentially your fault. You should take some measures to ensure that nobody comes and steals from you. So, obviously Shopify gives you a semi-lock to be able to, guard against really obvious fraud attacks. But just like in the physical world, most people have alarm systems and they have checks and balances to ensure that they don't get stolen from and they don't have theft in their store. You need to do that in your online store. So Shopify just gives you like a really basic lock to make sure that, nobody comes with obvious fraud attacks, but you need to look at what tools and what options are available for you to ensure that you get what is equivalent to an alarm or to some other checks and balances to ensure that nobody can really infiltrate your online store and obviously cause fraudulent purchases, and then that results into chargebacks and so forth. So remember, even though your store is online, you still need, a lock and also an alarm and so on and so forth, just as you would with a physical store. Now you're probably wondering, well, I mean, I don't know, I signed up for Shopify, they should be able to do this stuff and so forth. And yes, they are able to do it, but it's different features and you have to go into your settings and into your fraud prevention to ensure that you turn things on and turn things off. And again, the next question you're probably wondering is, why doesn't Shopify just turn them on for me? That's because everybody's business is different. Your business model is not the same as my business model or the other person's and so forth. So maybe for you, for example, 3 transactions per day for your store makes sense because people are buying things that they need a lot of. Other people, it could be 1 transaction per day. Maybe you ship things outside of the US. Other stores, for example, just ship inside the US. So there's a lot of things that you have to think about with your business model so you can turn it on and off and decide what makes sense for your specific business. So that is the reason why Stripe, Shopify, PayPal, and all these big box payment processors and software providers don't turn these things on, because they can be different for every business and it could cause you obviously revenue losses if everybody had the same settings. So I'm going to talk to you today about what settings you need to think about to protect your store and to avoid a situation like Laura's where, you know, she lost a ton of money, she got charged all these extra fees. And like I said, unfortunately for Laura, she will not get that money back. She will actually have to pay this because she didn't take the measures to ensure that these orders were not fraudulent. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list. I'm really going to give you the big, options that you have on Shopify in their fraud section to ensure that you put in the main checks and balances for your store. Now, first and foremost, on your checkout page, when you collect customer information, make sure that you collect as much information as possible. So obviously, fraudsters have a limited amount of information on, whoever they're stealing cards from and so on and so forth. So if you can collect a phone number, a full billing address, a full name, a full card number, CVV, expiry date, and any other pertinent values, the more you can collect, the better. Obviously, you don't want to drive your customers away by asking them too much information, but we are all very used to providing our address and our phone number and our email and kind of our personal details when we're buying something online. So this is not, out of left field. And even if you're selling a digital product, I know that a lot of people who sell digital products say, why do I need to collect somebody's billing address? Well, the reason for it is to prevent fraud. And if chargebacks occur, at least you have an extra data point that you can present to show that you did what you could to prevent the fraud. Now, after you collect this information, there's something called AVS, which is Address Verification Service. And you can actually reference with Shopify, if you're using Shopify Payments or whichever processor you're using within the Shopify environment, to verify if the billing address matches the billing address that the customer input on your checkout page. Now, this is not automatic. You need to tell Shopify, I would like to verify that the address matches. If not, they won't do it by default. And sometimes it will match and sometimes it won't match. So you have to decide that the billing address on the customer's credit card matches the billing address that they input on your checkout form. And obviously this will prevent quite a bit of fraud. And it's a very important step to make sure that, you're not processing bad orders. Now, following that, there's a CVV number, which is the last 3 digits in back of the card. And you can, again, ask the bank to verify that this number matches what is on the customer's card. It's not automatically done by Shopify. You need to instruct it that, yes, I want a CVV check to be done, and I will accept cards that match the CVV and maybe cards that I don't get a response for, because sometimes you may not get a response. It may say CVV unknown. You have to decide whether you want to approve those transactions or decline those transactions. Now, most of the time I say in an online environment, it's a good idea to accept those transactions when you're collecting other data points. Now, if it comes back that the CVV does not match, that's when I would decline the transaction. You can also put some checks and balances, for example, to allow the maximum number of transactions per day or per month, or even both, per card number. So if somebody has a credit card, how many times can they buy with that credit card? Or how many times can they buy with a specific email address? Or how many times can they buy coming from the same IP address. So you have to think of all these different scenarios and keep in mind like what makes sense for your product and your service and what you're offering to your clients. And if, for example, you're selling a skin cream, how many skin creams does it make sense that somebody may buy? 1, 2, maybe 3 if they want to give a gift, and so on and so forth. So, you have to put the maximum number of transactions that make sense. And I would highly recommend that you put a number of transactions per day and a number of transactions per month, because that can vary. For example, if I buy something today and I really like it and I want to buy one for my friend and my sister and so on and so forth, I may make some additional orders, but you may limit me today to making 1 or 2 orders. And then, maybe for the month, you may give me a maximum of 5 orders that I can place in a month. So keep these things in mind and try your best, obviously, to pick a number that makes sense without it being too exaggerated or too restrictive. And obviously, email address, a lot of fraudsters do use different cards. So they use different cards to make transactions, but they use the same email address. So you should consider limiting the amount of times you let somebody buy from you if they're using the same email address. So keep those things in mind. Come up with a plan. And obviously the important thing is to review your declined transactions fairly regularly after you input these rules, and to look if these things make sense or if you're being too restrictive and so forth. So usually what I do is when I turn on certain features, I give it about a day or two, and then I go in to my transactions and I look at, which ones are approved, which ones are declined, and why they're declined. If I'm starting to see a lot of declines for a reason that doesn't make sense, then I have to think about rolling back certain things that I did and certain changes or restrictions that I made to my fraud settings. Now, there is also a feature in the fraud settings at Shopify where you can manually review orders. If, for example, you're selling something that's $100, but then somebody buys, 10 of them and it comes out to be $1,000, you can say that any orders, for example, over $500, I want a manual review. So, they'll be put on a separate list where you can log in, take a look, and see if this makes sense. Now, you can say, approve it and then I'll manually review it, or you can say, put this on hold or decline it and I'll manually review it and call the customer myself. So that's, obviously your decision and depends on your business. But if you have very large orders and, they're fairly uncommon, you may want to do a manual review of larger orders. And also, talking about larger orders, a phone call really does go a long way. So obviously, if you're looking at a large order, you're not really sure if this is a good idea or to approve it, or if it's a real order or not. 99% of the time, if somebody's trying to fraud you and you call them, you'll be able to tell, or they won't answer. They'll never respond to you because they know it's fraud, and they'll know that obviously you found them out. So, sometimes think about just picking up the phone, as archaic as that sounds, and just calling the customer to verify certain details. You can just tell them this is a random verification check. We just want to make sure your address is correct. We want to make sure we send the right products, whatever the case is. But a phone call can really be very helpful for large orders or orders where you're hesitant that, this might be a bad order or fraudulent order and so forth. Now, another important feature that you can consider adding is matching the IP address from where the customer is buying from to the billing address. So if you're collecting the billing address and somebody says, I'm in Miami, Florida, but then the IP address of their computer is saying Greece, for example. Well, does that make sense? Obviously people travel and it could happen that, my billing address is in Florida, but I'm physically in Europe, whatever the case is. But it really depends on the type of product or service that you're offering. For digital products, I would say, yes, this could happen a little bit more often. For physical products, not so much, right? If I'm on vacation somewhere or I'm away, am I actually physically buying, healthcare products or skincare supplements, whatever the case is. So you need to consider your business case and if it makes sense. And what you could do is these transactions, when the billing address does not match the IP, you could flag them for a manual review, or you can add an extra validation, something called 3D Secure or Strong Customer Authentication. So you can actually say, when the billing address does not match the IP or does not match close to where the IP is of the computer buying that product or service, I would like the customer to do an extra validation, which is kind of like a 2FA. They'll get a code on their phone and they'll have to enter that code to really prove it's them. So, these are a little bit, more advanced techniques, but it works great if you're really hesitant and you don't want to lose orders. You can start making up these rules in order to have subsets of specific clients and not to decline maybe orders that are good orders. Now, obviously, you're selling things online. You want to have a worldwide audience, but there are certain countries where perhaps it doesn't really make much sense for you to be selling your product or service. For example, if you're shipping out a physical product and you're in the United States and you have to ship something to Southeast Asia, does it make sense for you to ship it there? Can you even ship it there? Is that a possibility? If it's not, then what you should do is you should ban the countries that you don't ship to. I mean, if you're not shipping to these countries, then there is no reason for customers from those countries to be buying from you. If you're selling a digital product, for example, what you may want to do is consider which countries would even make sense for you to sell. Like, is there disposable income? If you're from the US and you're selling to a third world country, something that is $200-300 when, the average salary of people in a specific country is $100, would it make sense to even sell there? And leaving these doors open may open you up to more fraud. So just take a look at your market, take a look at what you're selling, the price points and so forth, and start banning specific countries where it doesn't make sense for you to sell or places that you don't even ship your products to, just to kind of close that gap for obvious fraud that may come in. Now, I know I gave you guys a long list, and these are just some really basic things, and it may sound confusing, but I'll be very honest with you. It'll just take you about an hour to go through this. There are fraud settings in Shopify or any CRM or any payment services provider that you work with has these types of settings. You can just turn them on and just, tinker around with them, make them as loose as possible at the beginning, just so you can understand how they all work, and then give it a couple of weeks and tweak them for your business model. But the important thing for you to remember is that it is your responsibility to protect your online store from fraud. And when bad things happen, for example, bad transactions or a lot of fraudulent activity, unfortunately, it is your burden to bear. You will get charged the chargeback fees. You will get all these purchases, taken away from you. So if you're shipping products and you have costs, that can add up to a lot of revenue loss. So make sure that you take a note of these and dig in it a little bit deeper to ensure that you're protecting your store. You're not just leaving your door unlocked at night. You're making sure that you're locking the door and you're putting the alarm on your online store. And obviously, you will not prevent 100% of fraud, but taking these measures will ensure at least that the obvious fraud, and taking these measures will ensure that fraudsters will not take advantage of your store, and they'll move on because they'll realize that, hey, you have some things that you're checking and you're not just letting anything in. And if you need more help and more tips on what you can do to prevent fraud on your online store, feel free to drop me a line. My contact information is below. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please leave me some feedback. Don't forget to like and share this episode for more great content.